The great hall shimmered with golden light, its high ceilings painted with swirling stars that glowed faintly as if they were alive. Rows of tables stretched across the floor, filled with food and drink that humans could barely imagine. Platters of glowing fruit, crystal bowls of blue fire that gave off no heat, and tall cups of silver liquid that seemed to sing when touched. Alien nobles dressed in silks that reflected every shade of violet and gold filled the seats. Their voices blended into a music of laughter, gossip, and sharp remarks, all echoing under the vaulted roof. At the far end of the hall stood the throne-like dais where the bride and groom sat. Tonight was not just a wedding, it was an alliance. Two powerful houses of the alien race had joined their bloodlines, and everyone came to witness it. The guests smiled, drank, and clapped their hands, but beneath it all lay an unspoken truth. This union was less about love and more about power. Among all the glowing alien faces, one figure looked terribly out of place. Daniel, the human diplomat, sat quietly at the far side of the hall. His chair was smaller, his cup simpler. Though the hosts treated him with polite words, he knew he was only here as a token, an outsider, invited more for politics than for companionship. His suit, though neatly pressed, looked plain compared to the flowing robes around him. He kept his head low, taking careful sips of water instead of the strange drinks offered. He listened as nobles talked in their rolling, melodic language, a tongue he barely understood. He did not laugh when they laughed, for the jokes were not his to join. He simply sat, a quiet figure in the storm of voices. And yet, Daniel's eyes could not help but wander. They drifted again and again to the bride, Lady Sarai. She sat tall, her silver blue skin glowing softly beneath the golden lights. Her hair, long and shimmering like a waterfall of light, cascaded down her shoulders. She looked perfect, like something from a dream, dressed in a gown spun from threads that caught the stars themselves. To everyone else, she was radiant. To Daniel, she was tragic. Because he saw what no one else seemed to notice. Her smile was not real. Her laughter did not reach her eyes. Her fingers, resting on the arm of her seat, trembled ever so slightly each time her groom leaned closer. Daniel knew enough about people, human or alien, to recognize a soul that was breaking inside. Earlier that day, before the feast began, he had wandered into the gardens outside the palace. There, among the tall silver trees, he had found her sitting alone. Her face had been hidden in her hands, her shoulders shaking softly. When she noticed him, she had quickly wiped her eyes, standing tall as if nothing had happened. "Are you all right?" Daniel had asked, his voice gentle, almost uncertain. She had stared at him for a long moment, her bright alien eyes wide. Perhaps it surprised her that anyone would ask such a simple question. Finally, she had whispered, "It does not matter. It is my duty." Daniel had shaken his head. Even duty should not crush the heart. The words were plain, almost clumsy, but something in them struck her. For the first time, she had given a small, real smile. Not the polished, practiced smile she wore for the nobles, but a fragile one, like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. Now, as the music swelled and the nobles laughed, Daniel remembered that moment. And he saw it again. The same sorrow behind. Her perfect mask. The groom, Lord Varric, was nothing like her. He was tall, armored even at his own wedding feast, his voice a deep rumble that shook the air whenever he spoke. His laughter was loud, his hand heavy on her shoulder. When she turned, her face toward him, she smiled. But Daniel, watching from afar, saw the stiffness in her jaw, the way her eyes looked away too quickly. She was beautiful, yes, but she was also alone, even surrounded by 1,000 voices. And Daniel, the only human in the room, the outsider, who had no place here, was the only one who noticed. Earlier that day, before the hall filled with laughter and golden light, Daniel had wandered into the palace gardens. The gardens were vast, filled with silver-leafed trees that shimmered even in the faint morning light. Streams of water ran in crystal channels, reflecting colors that seemed impossible to describe. Alien birds sang melodies that twisted and turned in the air, their wings flashing in a spectrum humans could barely see. Yet despite all this beauty, there was a sorrow in the garden that no one noticed. Lady Sarai sat on a carved stone bench beneath one of the taller trees. Her silver-blue skin gleamed faintly in the morning sun, her long hair cascading over her shoulders like a river of light. But her eyes were red. Her hands shook slightly as she rubbed them over her face. She had been crying, alone, and no one had cared enough to check on her. Daniel hesitated as he approached. He was unsure if he should speak. After all, he was just a human, an outsider. His presence here was an accident of politics, not friendship. Yet something about her sadness called to him. It wasn't just beauty he saw, it was despair, a soul quietly suffering hidden behind perfection. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, his voice careful so as not to startle her. Sarai froze, her head snapping up. For a moment she stared at him, wide-eyed, as if she had never imagined anyone would notice her pain. It does not matter," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It is my duty. I have no choice." Daniel knelt slightly to appear less threatening. "Duty is one thing," he said gently, "but no duty should break your heart. Not like this." The corners of her lips twitched in a small, uncertain smile. It was not the practiced smile she wore for nobles, polished and precise. It was fragile, like a butterfly's wing trembling in the wind. You speak strangely," she said softly, almost confused. "Most people do not notice. Most do not care." "I notice," Daniel replied, his voice steady. "And I do care. Even if I am just a human, even if my words do not matter to anyone else, they matter to you. That is enough." For a long moment, Sarai said nothing. She lowered her gaze, and for the first time that day, she allowed herself to breathe without the weight of expectation pressing down on her. The humans had a saying, Daniel remembered. A small kindness can grow into a forest of hope. Perhaps that was what he offered her now, a tiny spark in a world of rules, duty, and false smiles. Thank you," she whispered finally. Her voice was raw, vulnerable, but there was something genuine in it. "No one has ever said such words to me. Not my parents, not my betrothed, not even my friends." Daniel smiled faintly. "Sometimes, the simplest words are the most powerful. You deserve to be seen, Sarai. Truly seen, not as a jewel, not as a trophy, but as yourself." Her eyes glistened with tears. She looked away, ashamed of the emotions threatening to escape. I cannot change what is expected of me. The marriage, the alliances. It is all beyond my control. I am trapped." "Perhaps," Daniel said, "you cannot change everything, but you can choose how you face it. You can choose what you allow to hurt you and what you refuse to surrender. You are stronger than you know." She turned her gaze toward him, her silver blue eyes wide and searching. You are different from everyone else," she said softly. "Most humans I have met are curious, polite, but distant. You see me, Daniel, you care." Daniel hesitated, unsure what else to say. He did not want to promise her the impossible. He could not save her from duty or from the groom she was expected to marry, but he could give her something else. The knowledge that her feelings mattered, that someone recognized her struggle. In that moment, Sarai's shoulders relaxed slightly. She smiled again, not fully, but enough for the sun to catch the shimmer in her eyes. And Daniel, looking at her, felt a warmth in his chest he did not understand. Perhaps it was hope. Perhaps it was connection. Whatever it was real, and it was fragile. As the garden grew quieter, with the palace waking and servants beginning their duties, Daniel knew he had made a mark on her day. And in a life measured by protocol, expectations, and control, even a single moment of genuine kindness could feel like a revolution. Sarai turned back to her path, and Daniel left the garden slowly, his heart heavier than before. He did not know what the future held, He did not know if he would see her again before the wedding, but he knew one thing: she was not alone, not completely. Someone, for even a brief moment, had noticed her truth. And sometimes, Daniel thought, that was enough to change everything. The hall was alive with music, laughter, and chatter, yet Daniel could feel the tension that only he seemed to notice. From his seat at the edge of the long table, he watched Lady Sarai, the bride, carefully. Every movement of hers seemed precise, practiced, almost as if she were a puppet on strings. Her eyes, however, betrayed the truth. They flickered with unease, a silent cry for relief that none of the nobles could or would hear. The groom, Lord Varick, sat opposite her, a mountain of an alien with skin like polished stone and eyes as sharp as shards of glass. His voice rumbled whenever he spoke, low and commanding, and it carried across the hall like distant thunder. Every word he uttered was layered with authority, a subtle warning that he ruled not just his house but those around him through fear. To him, marriage was power, and Sarai was nothing more than an object to be claimed. As the music swelled and dancers twirled in hypnotic patterns, Daniel noticed how Varick would occasionally glance at Sarai, a possessive glint in his eyes. Each time she forced a smile, tilted her head, laughed politely, but her hand trembled, resting briefly on the table before she tucked it back into her lap. Daniel's heart tightened. He recognized the signs of fear and submission, and it made him uneasy. Human, a voice snapped behind him. Daniel turned slightly and found one of Varick's attendants watching him with a thinly veiled suspicion. Do not stare too long. You are a guest here, nothing more. Daniel bowed his head slightly, keeping his expression calm. I am merely admiring the beauty of the evening, he replied softly. The words were true, though his eyes had another meaning entirely. He was admiring Sarai, not the hall, not the jewels, but her courage hidden beneath the perfection she was forced to display. Varick's voice cut through the air like a blade, echoing across the hall. You stare too much, human, he said, his tone dark and commanding. The nobles nearby stilled, sensing the potential for conflict. All eyes turned toward Daniel, who remained seated, composed yet alert. Daniel's pulse quickened, but he did not flinch. He lowered his gaze briefly before speaking, careful, precise. Only admiring the beauty of the evening, he repeated. His voice was quiet, yet in it lay a quiet defiance. He did not bow or cower before Varick, even as the alien's aura of authority pressed down on him. Sarai's lips trembled ever so slightly. She had seen Daniel intervene subtly, even when she could not speak. His calm defiance was not loud, but it spoke volumes. For the first time that evening, she felt a flicker of hope, a small light in the oppressive shadows that surrounded her. Varick, however, did not appreciate such quiet opposition. He leaned slightly toward Sarai, his expression sharp and commanding. Are you content, bride? This human dares to observe you as if you are free to smile and laugh at his will? Sarai's smile remained fixed, though her hands curled slightly in her lap. Yes, my lord, she said softly. Her voice was measured, but it carried a subtle tremor. A whisper of rebellion, perhaps, that only Daniel could understand. The nobles exchanged glances, some curious, some shocked. It was rare to see anyone, especially a human, stand their ground, in the presence of Lord Varick. Yet Daniel did not seek confrontation. He only sought to notice what others ignored. He wanted Sarai to know that someone saw her truth, that her heart mattered even when the world demanded she hide it. Varick's eyes narrowed, sensing the subtle challenge in Daniel's quiet presence. It was a dangerous game to play in the alien court, where power and perception mattered more than truth. Yet Daniel remained calm, a human among giants, relying not on strength but on courage, a courage unfamiliar to these nobles. As the music continued, Daniel's attention never wavered from Sarai. Each glance from her to him, fleeting though it was, seemed to tell a story he could read clearly, a story of fear, longing, and unspoken despair. He could not act openly. He was only a guest after all, but he could remain vigilant, a silent witness to her suffering. And in that quiet observation, a bond began to form. a bond that transcended their differences, their species, and the rigid rules of the court. For in noticing her sorrow and acknowledging it, Daniel gave Sarai something she had never received before: validation, empathy, and a subtle courage that even Lord Varric could not crush. The hall carried on with laughter, music, and polite conversation, oblivious to the quiet tension that Daniel's presence had stirred. But in the midst of all the pomp and protocol, one truth had begun to take root: that even a human, small and seemingly powerless in this alien world, could make a difference simply by seeing the heart behind the mask. As the hall continued to hum with music, laughter, and the clinking of crystal cups, Sarai found herself slipping away. She moved silently, her long, shimmering hair brushing against her shoulders, until she reached the balcony. Outside, the night sky stretched endlessly, a tapestry of stars and distant planets, more brilliant than anything Daniel had ever seen on Earth. The cool night air brushed against her face, carrying the scent of silver blossoms from the gardens. Below. Daniel had followed quietly, careful not to startle her. He arrived just a few steps behind, pausing to let her speak first. Sarai leaned against the balcony railing, her eyes distant, fixed on a cluster of stars. Her face was pale, delicate, and under the glow of the night, she looked more vulnerable than ever. "You should not be here," she whispered, her voice almost lost in the breeze. "If someone from the hall sees us, they will be angry. They will not understand why you are here with me." Daniel took a slow step forward, keeping his hands visible and calm. "I do not care about what they will think," he said gently. "I only care about you, Sarai, about how you feel." She turned her head slightly to glance at him, her eyes shimmering with tears she tried to hide. You should not speak to me like this. You are human. I am bound to him. Bound by duty, by family, by everything that shapes my life. You cannot understand." Daniel shook his head softly. "I may not understand everything, but I understand one thing very clearly. You are unhappy. You are trying to be what they expect you to be, but it is breaking you inside. That is something I can see, and I will not pretend it does not exist." Sarai looked away, biting her lip. She had spent her whole life learning how to mask her emotions, how to smile when her heart ached, how to say the words expected of her. But with Daniel, she felt no need to hide. She could speak freely, even if only in whispers. "You speak boldly for someone so small," she said finally, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Most people, my parents, my betrothed, even the attendants, they only see the mask. They do not see me. They do not care to." Daniel stepped closer, his voice steady but soft. "Then let me see you truly. Not as a bride, not as a jewel or a prize, but as Sarai, as the person who deserves to be happy." Her lips quivered, and she turned her gaze fully toward him, the silver light of the stars reflecting in her eyes. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel the weight of her loneliness. You are different. Humans are usually distant. Curious, yes, but distant. You care." Daniel met her gaze, unflinching. "I care, and I am not the only one who could. But tonight, at least, I can be someone who does. That is enough, isn't it?" Sarai's shoulders shook slightly as she tried to hold back her tears. She whispered, almost to herself, I wish someone had seen me like this before. Someone who truly cared, not for what I represent, but for what I am." Daniel's heart tightened. He wanted to reach out to comfort her, but he knew boundaries existed, even for someone like him. "You are stronger than you think," he said softly. "Even in this world, with all its rules and expectations, your heart still belongs to you. And no one can take that away." She let out a shaky breath, and for a moment, they simply stood in silence, listening to the wind rustle through the silver leaves of the garden below. The sounds of the hall faded, replaced by the quiet intimacy of two souls connecting in a world that demanded they remain apart. Finally, her voice broke the silence, soft and trembling, but filled with a raw honesty she had never allowed herself before. I wish you were my husband, human." The words hung in the air like a delicate crystal, fragile yet unyielding. Daniel's breath caught. He had never imagined hearing such a confession, not from someone so regal, so bound by duty. And yet there it was, a truth spoken aloud, pure and unbroken. Sarai looked down, ashamed that she had said it, afraid of what might come next. But Daniel simply stood beside her, silent, letting the words exist between them. He did not interrupt, did not question. He only offered the quiet strength of understanding, the knowledge that her heart was seen and acknowledged. And in that moment, on the balcony under the infinite night sky, something shifted. Something unspoken began to grow, a bond that neither duty, fear, nor social expectation could easily break. For both human and alien. That small, fragile moment of honesty was more powerful than any law, any alliance, or any royal decree. It was the first spark of something extraordinary. The words lingered in the night air like a fragile spark refusing to die. "I wish you were my husband, human." Sarai had whispered them on the balcony, trembling, her eyes fixed on the distant stars. Daniel stood beside her, silent, letting the confession exist in its pure form. He knew the weight it carried, a human and an alien bride. Such words, spoken aloud, were not meant to exist in this world of rigid rules and expectations. But what neither of them expected was how quickly the hall had noticed. The music, the laughter, the chatter, they all fell into a strange, suspended silence. The dancers froze mid-spin. The nobles turned toward the balcony, their expressions a mix of shock, curiosity, and disbelief. Even the servants paused, unsure what had caused this sudden hush. Daniel felt Sarai's hand tremble against the railing. He glanced at her, catching the faint quiver of her lips, the way her eyes darted, nervously. "It's all right," he whispered softly. "You spoke the truth. That is courage, Sarai. Nothing can take that away." She nodded, barely able to meet his gaze. Her heart pounded, not with fear alone, but with a strange mixture of relief and terror. She had never spoken so freely before, never allowed herself to admit a longing so human, so raw, so impossible in the eyes of her people. Then came the sound of heavy steps. Lord Varric, the groom, appeared at the balcony doorway. His armor gleamed under the golden light of the hall, his presence filling the space with an oppressive weight. His eyes, like polished obsidian, locked onto Daniel and then Sarai. Fury and humiliation warred within him. To be rejected publicly, to be compared unfavorably to a human, was an insult deeper than any blade. "Sarai," Varric's voice boomed, shaking the balcony. "What nonsense is this? You speak to a guest as if you belong to him, not me." The word sent a shiver through the night air. Daniel instinctively stepped slightly in front of Sarai, though he knew he could not truly shield her from the wrath of a lord. Yet his posture was steady, his presence calm. He did not falter. "I spoke only truth," Sarai said, her voice trembling, but firm. "My heart is mine. It speaks what it feels, no matter the expectations around me." The hall below fell into deeper silence. Music had stopped entirely. Even the bravest nobles dared not move or speak. Whispers began to ripple, growing in volume as everyone realized what had just occurred. Sarai had broken the protocol, shattered the illusion of the perfect, obedient bride. She had spoken to a human, not a noble, not her betrothed, with honesty, with heart. Varric's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You dare?" "I do dare," Sarai interrupted, surprising even herself with the firmness in her voice. "I am tired of pretending, Lord Varric. I am tired of hiding behind smiles and masks. If my heart cannot speak, then what life is there for me at all?" Daniel felt the tension coil like a serpent around them. Every noble in the hall was watching, waiting for the storm to erupt. Some gasped openly. Some whispered to one another, shaking their heads in disbelief. None had ever seen a bride speak to a groom with such defiance, especially to a human. And then Daniel realized something astonishing. For the first time that night, he sensed the power of truth. Not the power of arms, or of title, or of tradition, but the quiet, unyielding power of courage. Sarai's words had carved a space where fear and expectation could not reach. Her honesty had silenced an empire, if only for a moment. Varric's fists clenched, the sound of metal scraping echoing softly in the night. His face was a storm, fury and humiliation mixing into a dangerous tide. Yet the elders and nobles watched him carefully, noting his hesitation. To strike Daniel or to punish Sarai openly would be to lose face, to admit that a human could challenge the authority of a lord and a bride simultaneously. Sarai's chest rose and fell quickly, her trembling fingers brushing against the railing. Daniel placed a quiet hand near hers, not touching, not imposing, but offering presence. It was a reminder that she was not entirely alone, that even in defiance she had an ally. The hall remained silent, the moment stretching, fragile yet electric. Every whispered word, every sideways glance, every beating heart in the crowd carried the weight of what had happened. One woman's courage, speaking to a human, had created a shockwave stronger than any law or decree. Sarai finally looked at Daniel, tears brimming in her luminous eyes. You heard me," she whispered. "You didn't turn away." Daniel's lips curved into the faintest smile. "I heard you, and I will always hear you." And in that pause, under the night sky and the watchful gaze of hundreds of nobles, one simple truth became undeniable. Sometimes courage and honesty could shake worlds more profoundly than power, wealth, or fear. The words lingered, and the hall had no answer. They were silenced. The silence in the grand hall was suffocating. Every noble's eyes were fixed on the balcony, their whispers swallowed by the weight of the moment. Lord Varric's towering figure loomed above Daniel and Sarai, his every movement radiating power and menace. The air vibrated with tension as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. "You dare defy me?" Varric's voice rumbled like a storm, low and threatening. "You, human, and you, bride, how dare you embarrass me in front of all my house?" Daniel stepped forward, calm but unyielding. He was smaller, physically weaker, and he knew the danger of confronting an alien lord in his own hall. But he also knew something Varric could never understand. Courage was not measured by size or strength, but by heart. "I did not seek to embarrass you," Daniel said, his voice steady. "I only speak the truth. Sarai's heart belongs to her, and it has the right to be heard." Varric's eyes burned, his claws curling around the edge of the balcony railing. "Her heart belongs to me. She will obey her duty, and you—" "I am not here to fight you," Daniel interrupted, holding up a hand to show he meant no physical threat. "But I will not allow fear to silence her. That is all." The hall erupted into murmurs. Some nobles gasped at Daniel's audacity, while others whispered among themselves, questioning how a human could stand so firmly in the presence of power. Even some of Varric's allies hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. Sarai's hand brushed lightly against Daniel's sleeve, trembling, but her eyes held a spark of hope. "Please," she whispered. "He is dangerous. He could destroy everything." Daniel's gaze softened, and he knelt slightly to meet her eye level, not to appear smaller, but to offer reassurance. "Then let him see what courage looks like. Let him see that truth cannot be silenced. You have nothing to fear from being honest about your heart." Varric slammed a fist against the balcony, the sound reverberating like thunder. "You think you can lecture me? A human?" His rage was a living thing, palpable and threatening. "Do you understand the consequences of your actions? Do you know what it means to challenge a lord in his hall?" Daniel did not flinch. His voice remained calm, filled with a quiet certainty that cut through the tension. "Yes, and I am willing to face them, because she deserves to be heard. Because she is more than an object to be claimed. Because her heart matters." A hush fell over the hall again. The elders, their eyes sharp and observant, began to whisper among themselves. Varric's power was undeniable, yet the weight of Daniel's courage pressed against him, exposing a weakness no blade could cut. The human, small and foreign, held the moral ground. And in a society ruled by fear and protocol, that was a weapon, more dangerous than any sword. Sarai straightened, finding her voice. I am not your possession, Varric. I do not belong to duty alone. My heart is mine, and I choose what I allow it to feel. Daniel felt her tremor ease slightly. She was no longer hiding, no longer pretending. She was alive in her words, radiant, in a way that even the palace lights could not match. Varric's fists unclenched slowly, his anger simmering but restrained. He was powerful, yes, but to act now, to strike Daniel or punish Sarai openly, would reveal his vulnerability to the entire hall. He would lose face. The murmurs from the nobles made that clear. Courage, even from a human, had a weight that power alone could not erase. Daniel stepped closer to Sarai, not aggressively, but protectively. You are seen, he said softly, looking into her silver blue eyes. You are heard, and no matter what happens, that cannot be taken from you. For a long moment, the hall was suspended in that fragile balance. Music had stopped, the dancers froze mid-step, and even the walls seemed to hold their breath. Daniel, a human among aliens, had turned the tide not with strength, but with honesty, empathy, and courage. Finally, Varric straightened, his voice, quieter now but still dangerous. This is not over, he said. His gaze lingered on Daniel, but there was hesitation now where there had been only certainty. The hall knew it had witnessed something unprecedented. A human had stood firm against the mightiest lord, and the bride had spoken her truth. Sarai exhaled slowly, a weight lifting from her shoulders. Daniel's presence beside her, steady and unwavering, gave her strength she had never known she possessed. She had spoken her heart, and in doing so she had changed the power of the room entirely. In that moment, Daniel realized the truth of something he had always believed. Bravery was not about fighting, and love was not about possession. Both could be quiet, small, and yet utterly unstoppable. And the hall, once filled with fear and expectation, had learned that even a single act of courage could resonate farther than the mightiest decree.